What if the love you thought was lost forever suddenly stood right in front of you? Imagine carrying years of grief, only to hear the voice you prayed you would never forget. In this fanfiction episode of Heartland Season 19, Ty's shocking return breaks the silence of Amy's world. But when joy collides with pain, can a broken heart truly forgive? The morning at Heartland began like any other. The golden light of the rising sun stretched across the valley, casting warm shadows over the horses as they grazed in the open field. Amy stood by the fences, her hands gently resting on the worn wood as she watched Spartan trot across the paddock with his familiar strength. Her heart carried the same weight it had for years, a mix of pride in the life she had built and sorrow for the love she still mourned. Lindy's laughter floated from the barn, her bright little voice filling the air as she chased after a playful puppy. For a moment it felt peaceful. For a moment, Amy almost believed she was finally learning how to live with the silence left behind by Ty. But peace has a way of shattering without warning. There was something strange about this morning. The air felt heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Amy wiped the sweat from her brow and tried to push away the unease that grew inside her. Jack's truck rumbled past the house, the sound familiar, comforting. Lisa waved from the porch with her warm smile, coffee in hand. Everything looked normal, but Amy's heart beat faster, as though it already knew what her eyes had not yet seen. She turned her head when she heard tires crunching against the gravel road. Another vehicle, not one she recognized. Her chest tightened. Visitors weren't unusual at Heartland, but this felt different. The engine slowed, the truck pulling closer, each second stretching into an eternity. Amy felt her pulse racing as she stepped closer to the driveway, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust. The truck came to a stop, the door creaked open, and for a moment, only silence filled the space. A boot stepped out first, firm against the gravel. Then another. Amy's eyes narrowed, her breath catching in her throat as she waited for the figure to reveal himself. And then it happened. A voice. Low, steady, but trembling with emotion. A voice she knew better than her own heartbeat. Amy. Her world stopped. Her hands gripped the fence so hard her knuckles turned white. That voice had been gone for years, locked away in memories and dreams. She wanted to believe it, but fear told her it wasn't possible. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, and there he was. Ty, standing only a few feet away. His face older, marked by struggle and distance, but his eyes, the same blue eyes that once promised her forever, were staring back at her with an ache she could not describe. Amy felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The air left her lungs, replaced by a rush of emotions she had no control over. Shock, anger, hope, fear. She didn't move, couldn't move. Time itself seemed frozen as Ty took a cautious step forward, his hands trembling at his sides. In that single breath, Amy knew that her life had just changed forever. Amy stood frozen, staring at the man she had buried in her heart years ago. Her chest rose and fell in sharp breaths, her eyes searching his face for proof that this was real. The silence between them was louder than thunder. Ty didn't move closer at first, as if he feared that if he reached for her she would vanish, or worse, send him away. Finally, Amy found her voice, though it broke in the middle of a whisper. Ty, how is this possible? Her words cut through the still morning air, trembling with both longing and fury. Ty swallowed hard, his eyes glistening, his voice quiet but steady. I know what you're thinking. I know this doesn't make sense. But I'm here. I'm real. Amy's hands shook at her sides. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him and never let go. But the storm inside her refused to let her take even a step forward. Her lips pressed together. And when she spoke again, the warmth of her voice was gone, replaced by anger that had been waiting for years. You left me, Ty. You left Lindy. You left all of us. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Her voice cracked, but she stood firm, tears burning in her eyes. The weight of every lonely night, every dream shattered, every morning she had to wake up without him, came crashing down in her words. Ty flinched, guilt shadowing his face. He took another step toward her, his boots crunching against the gravel. I didn't want to leave. I never wanted this. Something happened, Amy. Something I couldn't control. I had no choice. Amy shook her head violently, backing away a single step as if distance could protect her from the ache of hearing his voice again. No choice? Do you know what I told our daughter every night when she asked about you? I told her you were in heaven. I told her you were watching over us, that you'd always be here in spirit. I made peace with losing you, Ty. And now you're standing here telling me you had no choice? Her words hit him like a blow, but he didn't turn away. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he let the silence sit heavy between them before speaking again, his tone almost breaking. I know I can't undo the pain. I know I can't give back those years. But I can tell you this, Amy. Every second I was away, I thought about you. About Lindy, about this place. And if I had a way back sooner, I swear, I would have found it. Amy's throat tightened, her body trembling from the war inside her heart. Part of her wanted to believe him, to surrender to the love that still flickered like a flame refusing to die. But another part of her screamed that she couldn't trust the man who had vanished from her life without explanation. Her tears finally spilled, rolling down her cheeks as she whispered, "You don't get to just walk back into my life and expect me to forgive you." Ty's eyes filled with his own tears, and he nodded slowly, accepting her words like a punishment he knew he deserved. I'm not asking for forgiveness, not yet. I'm only asking for a chance to explain, and to prove that I never stopped loving you. Amy stood silent, her heart twisting, torn between the ghost of her grief and the man standing alive before her. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but never like this, never with so much pain tangled in the hope. And as the morning sun rose higher over Heartland, it was clear to both of them. This was only the beginning of a storm that could either heal them or destroy them forever. The silence between them felt unbearable. Amy wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and longing. Ty stood a few feet away, his shadow stretching across the gravel, his eyes locked on hers as if afraid she would vanish if he dared to blink. Finally, Jack stepped forward from the porch, his voice steady, carrying the weight of years of wisdom. Son, if you're back, you better have something to say. Because right now, all I see is Amy breaking all over again. Ty's jaw tightened. He nodded, then turned his gaze back to Amy. I owe you the truth, every word of it. But it's not an easy story to tell. Amy's voice cut sharp, fueled by years of unanswered questions. Then start talking, Ty. Because right now, I don't know whether to scream at you or hold you. Ty lowered his head, his hands clenching into fists before releasing again, as though he were fighting battles within himself. He drew in a long breath, his voice raw as he spoke. After that night, when everything went wrong, I didn't die, Amy, but I came close. I was taken, far from here, far from everything I knew. There were people who needed me, situations I couldn't escape. At first I thought I'd be gone for weeks, then months, and before I knew it, years had passed. And every single day I thought about you, about Lindy, about coming home. But I couldn't, not without putting you all in danger. Amy's brow furrowed, confusion mixing with pain. Danger? What are you saying? That you disappeared to protect us? Ty's eyes met hers, his voice dropping lower, almost trembling. Yes. There were things I uncovered, people I crossed, that made it impossible for me to come back. If they knew about you, about Lindy, they would have used you to break me. Staying away was the only way I could keep you safe. Amy's breath caught. The thought of Ty choosing absence as protection twisted the knife deeper. Her voice rose, trembling. Do you realize what you're saying? That you left me drowning in grief so you could play hero somewhere else? That Lindy grew up thinking her father was a ghost? You don't get to call that love, Ty. You don't get to come back and say it was all for us. Her words struck hard, but Ty didn't flinch. His eyes glistened, his voice breaking as he whispered, I know, and I will never forgive myself for it. But if I had come back, Amy, if I had even written, even called, you wouldn't be standing here. They would have found you. They would have found Lindy. And I couldn't risk that. I couldn't lose you in a way that would be permanent. For a long moment, no one moved. The wind swept across the fields, carrying with it the sound of Lindy's laughter from inside the barn. That sound was a knife through Amy's heart. She turned away, her tears falling harder now, her hand pressed against her mouth to muffle the sob threatening to escape. Jack stepped closer to her, his arm hovering as if to offer comfort, but Amy shook her head. She didn't want comfort. She wanted the truth to stop hurting. Finally, she spun back toward Ty, her eyes blazing with the fire of someone who had suffered too much loss to simply forgive. If you're telling the truth, if everything you're saying is real, then you've come back to a daughter who doesn't even know you. You've come back to a woman who had to learn how to live without you. And you've come back to a family that may never trust you again. Ty's lips parted, but he didn't defend himself this time. He only nodded, his voice low. Then I'll fight for that trust, Amy, even if it takes the rest of my life. And with that, the storm within Heartland grew heavier. The past had returned, but the future was more uncertain than ever. Amy's body felt like it was on fire. Every nerve, every breath, every heartbeat screamed with the weight of everything Ty had said. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the hope that his words meant something, but the ache in her chest refused to let her surrender. The grief she had buried for years was clawing its way back to the surface, angrier, sharper, and louder than ever. Her voice cracked as she stepped closer, her tears shining in the sunlight. You don't understand, Ty. I mourned you. I buried you in my heart. I stood by Lindy every single night when she asked where her daddy was, and I had to look into her little eyes and tell her he was gone. Do you know what that did to me? To her? You weren't just absent. You were dead to us. Her words tore through the air like thunder, and for a moment, Ty flinched as if he'd been struck. His shoulders slumped, his face pale. The man who once rode fearlessly into danger now stood trembling before the woman he loved, powerless against her grief. Amy, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I thought I was protecting you. Her eyes burned with rage and sorrow. Protecting us? You broke us. You left me to explain death to a child who didn't deserve to know that kind of pain. You left me to figure out how to breathe again when half of me was gone. Don't you dare call that protection. Jack's hand gripped the railing of the porch, his knuckles white. He didn't speak, but his silence carried judgment heavier than words could. Lisa's eyes shimmered with tears as she glanced between Amy and Ty, helpless to stop the storm unraveling before her. And then, just as Amy's sobs broke loose, another sound cut through the chaos. A small voice, clear, innocent, fragile. Mommy? What's happening? Amy's head snapped around. Lindy stood in the doorway of the barn, her hair tousled from play, her tiny hands gripping the wooden frame. Her eyes were wide, filled with confusion as she looked between her mother and the stranger standing in the yard. Ty froze, his breath caught, his entire body stiffening. For years he had dreamed of this moment, seeing his daughter, hearing her voice. But now that it was here, he felt paralyzed. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. Amy spun back toward him, panic in her eyes. She wasn't ready. Lindy wasn't ready. None of them were ready. Don't! Amy hissed, her voice trembling. Don't you say a word. But it was too late. Lindy's gaze drifted from her mother to Ty. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her small brow furrowed as though something deep inside her was trying to make sense of what she saw. She took a few cautious steps forward, her voice quiet but certain. Mommy, who is that man? Amy's lips parted, but no words came. Her throat closed up, her body trembling violently. This was the moment she had dreaded, the moment she didn't know how to face. Ty's lips trembled, his hands shaking as he lifted them slightly, almost as if reaching across an invisible wall. His voice cracked, drenched in emotion. I'm your dad, Lindy. The world seemed to stop. Amy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lindy froze, her eyes widening, her chest rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths. For a moment she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the man whose voice carried something hauntingly familiar. And then, without warning, the silence broke with the sound of Amy's sobs. Loud, painful, unstoppable. She turned away, tears streaming down her face, torn apart by the truth she could no longer shield her daughter from. Ty stood trembling, his eyes locked on Lindy, the little girl who had grown without him, the little girl who now held his entire world in her small hands. And in that moment, one truth became clear. The storm at Heartland had only just begun. Lindy's small face tilted, her wide eyes studying the man who stood trembling only a few steps away. She had never seen him before, and yet something inside her stirred, as if the sound of his voice brushed against a memory she didn't know she carried. The barn behind her stood quiet, the puppy at her heels now sitting still, sensing the weight of the moment. Amy's heart raced as she stepped between them, instinctively shielding her daughter. Her arms stretched slightly, a barrier of protection, though her tears betrayed the strength she tried to hold on to. "Lindy, sweetheart, go back inside, please." But Lindy didn't move. Her little voice, soft but steady, cut through the air. "You said my daddy was in heaven." Amy's knees buckled at the words. She had rehearsed that explanation for years, weaving comfort out of sorrow, making sure Lindy believed her father was watching over her. And now here he stood, alive, unraveling everything Amy had worked so hard to build. Ty's breath hitched. He crouched down slowly, keeping his distance, lowering himself to her eye level. His voice trembled with hope and fear all at once. "I was gone for a long time, Lindy. Longer than I ever wanted. But I'm here now. I'm here because I love you. More than you'll ever know." Amy's tears fell harder as she shook her head, her voice sharp, almost pleading. "Stop it, Ty. Don't confuse her. Don't take this from her, too. She's just a child." But Lindy's gaze didn't leave him. Her tiny fists clenched at her sides, her lips quivering. Something unexplainable pulled her forward, a bond written in blood and memory. She took a careful step closer. "Why did you leave us?" The question pierced Ty's chest like a blade. He swallowed, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to leave, not for a single second. But I had to keep you safe. If I could have come back sooner, I would have. I swear it." Amy's hand touched Lindy's shoulder, but her daughter gently shrugged her off. Her young heart too curious, too desperate for answers. She took another step forward, now only a few feet away from him. Ty's tears blurred his vision as he saw the daughter he had missed birthdays, bedtimes, and mornings with. The little girl who didn't know the weight of the sacrifice he believed he had made. For a long, fragile moment, silence stretched between them. Then Lindy's small voice rose again, trembling. "Are you really my dad?" Ty's chest heaved, his voice steady but soaked in emotion. "Yes, I'm your dad, and I've dreamed of this moment for so long." Lindy's eyes glistened as she took a final, hesitant step closer. She didn't run into his arms. She didn't cry out. She simply reached out one small hand and touched his trembling fingers. It was the lightest touch, barely there, but it shattered Ty's heart. Amy gasped, her sobs catching in her throat as she watched the fragile connection form before her. She wanted to pull her daughter back, to shield her from the storm that would surely follow. But she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. For Lindy, it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't understanding. It was instinct, a child's heart recognizing something her mind couldn't yet explain. Ty's tears fell freely now as he whispered, "Thank you," but Amy's voice cut in sharply, the fire returning to her eyes even as her face glistened with tears. "This doesn't change anything. You don't just walk back into her life and claim the years you stole. If you want to be her father, Ty, you'll have to prove it. To her, to me, to all of us." And in that moment, as father and daughter touched for the first time, the battlefield of love and trust was drawn clear. Ty had returned, but the fight for his place at Heartland had only just begun. The yard was still, but the silence felt heavy enough to break a heart. Amy stood with her hand on Lindy's shoulder, her tears streaking down her face as Ty crouched in front of his daughter for the first time in years. That small, fragile touch between their fingers lingered like lightning in the air. From the porch, Jack finally stepped forward. His boots struck the ground with the weight of a man who had carried this family through storms greater than any one soul should bear. His weathered face was unreadable. His eyes narrowed not in anger, but in the deep, measured judgment of someone who had seen too much to trust easily. He stopped a few feet away, folding his arms across his chest. His voice cut through the silence, low and steady, carrying the authority of both a father and a protector. "That's enough!" Amy turned, startled by the firmness in his tone. Ty rose slowly, straightening his shoulders, but he didn't speak. He knew Jack's voice demanded silence. Jack's gaze settled hard on Ty, unblinking. "You don't get to walk up this drive and act like the years didn't happen. You don't get to stand here and spin words about sacrifice while Amy cried herself to sleep and this little girl grew up without her father." His voice trembled only slightly, but not with weakness, with fury held back by control. Ty's throat tightened, his lips parting as if to explain, but Jack raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, I don't want excuses. I've heard enough of those in my life. What I want is the truth. The truth about why you let us all think you were gone forever. Because whatever story you've been carrying, it better be worth every tear this family shed." Amy's hand clutched Lindy tighter. Lisa shifted uneasily on the porch, her eyes filled with sympathy, but her silence a show of respect for Jack's words. Ty swallowed, his voice cracking as he tried to speak. "I know what I've done. I know what it cost. And I'll tell you everything, Jack. Every single detail. But please," he glanced at Lindy, his eyes glassy, "please don't take her from me. Not now. Not when I finally have the chance to hold her hand." Jack's eyes softened for only a fraction of a second, then hardened again. His voice was like steel. "You'll earn that chance, but it won't be today, and it won't be tomorrow. You're standing on thin ice, Ty. And if you break Amy's heart again, or confuse that child one more time, you'll be out of here faster than you came back. Do I make myself clear?" Ty nodded, his entire body trembling under the weight of the ultimatum. His voice barely held steady. "Yes, sir." Jack took a slow step closer, his presence towering. Then, softer, almost breaking, he added, "I buried you too, son. I mourned you. Don't make me do it again." Those words landed heavier than any accusation. Ty's eyes filled with tears he couldn't hold back, his breath shaking. Amy turned away, her sobs quiet but relentless. Lindy clutched her mother's hand, not fully understanding but sensing the storm that surrounded her. Jack stepped back, his verdict clear. Ty might have returned, but whether he would ever be truly welcomed home was still a battle yet to be fought. And as the sun sank lower in the Heartland sky, the family stood on the edge of something fragile. Love hanging in the balance, trust yet to be rebuilt. The air around Heartland carried the weight of everything unsaid. The horses stirred uneasily in the paddocks, as if they too felt the storm that had swept across the ranch. Amy stood frozen, her arms still around Lindy, but her eyes locked on the man who had once been her whole world. Ty's presence felt like both a miracle and a wound that had been torn open again. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the wind whispered through the trees, carrying fragments of a past that could never be forgotten. Amy's chest rose and fell as though each breath was a battle. She had dreamed of this moment in the quiet hours of the night, when loneliness was too heavy to bear. But she never imagined it like this, with pain, betrayal, and questions that threatened to drown her. Finally, Amy's voice broke the silence, soft but laced with steel. "You don't get to stay here tonight, Ty. Not yet. Not after everything." Ty's face fell, his shoulders sagging beneath the crushing weight of her words. His lips parted as though he wanted to argue, to plead, but he saw the fire in her eyes and knew she was unshakable. He nodded once, his voice rough. "I understand. I'll go, but Amy, I'll come back tomorrow. And the next day. And every day after that, until I've earned my place again." Amy's tears flowed freely, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. I don't know if I even can." Ty's gaze lingered on her, then shifted to Lindy. His eyes softened, breaking completely as he whispered, "I'll wait as long as it takes. For both of you." Jack watched silently from the porch, his hand tightening around the railing. His face was carved with doubt, but in his eyes lingered something softer. The tiniest flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, the boy he once called family could find his way back. With slow, heavy steps, Ty turned toward his truck. The sound of his boots against the gravel echoed like thunder in Amy's chest. Lindy tugged gently at her mother's sleeve, her small voice breaking the tension. "Mommy, is he really my daddy?" Amy closed her eyes, the question striking deeper than any wound. Her voice came out as little more than a whisper. "Yes, sweetheart, he is." Ty paused, his back to them, his head bowed as if her words had reached him. He didn't turn around. He simply climbed into the truck, the door closing with finality. The engine rumbled to life, and slowly, painfully, the truck rolled down the long Heartland drive. Amy stood there in the fading light, holding her daughter close, her tears soaking into Lindy's hair. She watched the truck disappear into the horizon, her heart tearing between the love she once had and the fear of letting it destroy her again. As the dust settled on the empty road, Amy whispered into the silence, words meant for no one but herself. "I don't know if I can survive losing him twice." The screen would fade on her tear-streaked face. The ranch bathed in the glow of sunset, leaving the audience with one question burning in their hearts. Can love truly return from the dead? Or will the past forever haunt the future of Heartland?